So welcome to today's webinar, which focuses on the pension policies in 3 Eastern European member countries, notably Poland, Estonia, and Czechia. And we will have an introduction by my colleague Maciej Lis, who will focus on the results for these 3 countries that came out of our latest pensions at a glass presentation. And then, of course, we will have a discussion with representatives from these 3 member countries. I'm going to present them once you see them on the screen. Maciej, the screen is now yours, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say about Poland, Czechia, and Estonia in terms of pension policy evolvements.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and for the opportunity to look into these 3 countries and their pension systems, and to provide this overview, just a little bit background. I think everything will be looked more deeply by our experts discussing from the countries. So let me just start quickly with an overview and looking into key elements of the pension system and the challenges that these countries are facing, and maybe it will also become clear why looking into these 3 countries can be very useful and learning experience for not only them but for any other countries, as they have the countries differs and the challenges also differ, and to some extent are similar. And this was a setting, and these countries also share quite some historical background and regional and commonalities around them. So this is really nice example to see different outcomes with common features. So let me just now start my presentation here into looking into the current situation and the current outcomes of pensions in terms of the income of all the people, poverty. And when we look into what is the income of people over 65 compared to the average income of total population, we can see that our countries in focus do differ substantially, with Estonia having larger challenges. In fact, Estonia has the lowest relative income of all the people compared to average income along all OECD countries. And on the other side, you have Poland, which has exactly now the average income of the income. This is exactly at the average level among OECD countries. What is quite interesting also that over time, over the last 2 decades, you have seen a decrease of this income of all the people, especially in Poland from quite high levels. And this is the opposite trend that we observed in the OECD countries of average, where the relative income has increased in the last decades. It is not maybe a surprise, given that the low relative income of all the people, that in Estonia, you can see a very high old age poverty rate, which is the vertical axis on this line. This is compared to the horizontal line of the poverty rate in total population, because as you can see even here, there is very strong correlation between poverty rates among all different age groups. So Estonia really stands out, being the country with one of the highest poverty rates, above 35, almost 40% across OECD countries. And Poland and Czechia have much lower poverty rates. And Czechia is also might be quite surprising that given the not that high relative income, still the poverty rate is very low, both for the old age and total population. While for Poland, the poverty is close to the OECD average, the relative income. So let's say there's less of surprise here. Quite often we think that the poverty rates are very much related to the level of the first tier benefits, so the benefits that are irrelevant, that are not linked to the earnings and are not linked to the contribution histories. But as you can see here, the non-contributory first tier benefits are indeed in all these countries below the OECD average. But for example, Estonia not that much below. So the non-contributory benefits are those benefits that are not linked to any contribution history and are generally the safety nets or some residence-based basic pensions. But they also, you can see that they cannot explain the, for example, low poverty in Czechia or average in Poland. And the contributory benefits were generally minimum pensions or the contribution-based basic pensions. So the benefits that do rely on your contribution history, but less on the earnings, or not at all in earnings. But they are here also for Poland, Estonia, slightly above the OECD average, and for Czechia, slightly below. So it seems that the outcomes that we observe are more linked to the general design or the general earnings-related pensions that to the level of first-year benefits. One also interesting example for these countries, and it is quite common to all Central Eastern European countries, that the gender pension gaps are much lower than the OECD average and compared to other countries. Is it related to the especially high employment of women in the inherited over time? And here also Estonia is a striking example because this is the lowest gender pension gap in all OECD countries, related to a large extent to the high labor market participation of women. But also in Czechia, it is really the lower end across the whole distribution. Surprisingly, Poland has also low gender pension gap and a decreasing gender pension gap. Some extent surprising, given that Poland has the highest gap in the retirement age between men and women, and we can really observe that women do retire 5 years earlier than men in Poland. Retire meaning they start claiming pensions in earlier ages. But still, given the high employment and the lower ages and other features of the pension system, the gender pension gap is lower, and also very strong survival pension in Poland. So moving from income situation of all the people to more the retirement patterns and employment. Here this figure shows you the employment rate of people at age 60-64 on vertical axis against the normal retirement ages on average for men and women in these countries. By normal retirement ages, we mean the age when people can retire, assuming having full career and starting their career at age 22, and they can retire at normal without penalty. So here you can see that across countries there's a strong correlation. So the higher the normal retirement age, the higher the employment generally. It doesn't mean, of course, that the retirement age is the only contributing factor, but it is one of those, and it is an important one. And here you can see that in Estonia, and the employment rates are among the highest across OECD countries, whereas in Poland they are very low, even compared to the low retirement age. In Poland on average, because we show here the 62.5 as an average from 65 and 64 men and women. And in Czechia, the employment rates are also quite high, above the OECD average. So we can see that the outcomes here in terms of how long people remain on the labor market are very different across these three countries. And as also for the future, because one thing is what we observe now as the retirement ages, and one thing is what measures countries have assumed for the future. And here we compare the situation now, which is shown with the black diamonds, with so for people retiring now, compared to those who are entering the labor market now, who are expected to retire over the next 40-50 years. And you can see that on average across OECD countries, this normal retirement age is legislated to increase by almost 2 years. And among our countries, we can see that in Poland, there is no increases assumed now by the law. Czechia has just recently announced and legislated an increase of retirement ages from now being slightly below 65 to reaching 67 by 2056. And Estonia has a strong link of retirement ages to life expectancy, which if the demographic projections will realize as they assumed, it will reach 71 in the next 40 years, which will be one of the highest in the OECD. So we can see that this future and the thinking about future retirement ages is also quite different across countries, which I will come back more when looking now more into these recent trends in the general design of the pensions in these three countries. because what we have observed is just there is in Czechia there have been quite some effort to increase the retirement age recently to 67 in the future. In Estonia, Estonia has established a link, one-to-one link between the increase of life expectancy and retirement age, meaning that 1 year increase of life expectancy is leading to increase of 1 year of retirement ages, which is leading to quite high retirement ages in the future. And Poland has stalled in any effort to increase retirement ages and also keeping the gap between men and women in terms of retirement age. It is a result of revoking the past increase of retirement age, which was supposed to reach 67 in fact in Poland, but was revoked in 2017 with some decrease of retirement age in fact, and since then this has not been touched much. More generally, looking into systems, the design of the pension system to retirement ages in the last reforms, these countries have some common features. They all share the generally Bismarckian design with very important pay-as-you-go public pension system, delivering most of the old age income and being the main source of old age income. At the same time, they do differ in terms of the design of it, and they basically show the almost all design options for across countries of pay-as-you-go pensions. Because in Czechia, we observe there is a defined benefit scheme, which with a very progressive formula. So this is more, let's say, most traditional design of the pension system. And yes, so this is defined benefit scheme in Czechia. Then Estonia has developed a point system, but the point system meaning that pension entitlements are transformed into points, and this way they are communicated to people. But the point system in Estonia is quite special in the sense that there are quite some redistributive elements in the system, both in terms of basic pension and in terms of the points being more generously granted to those with lower income and less generously to those with higher income. And Poland has the third option to design pay-as-you-go schemes, related schemes, which is a notional defined contribution scheme introduced in 1999, which provides very strong links between earnings, the one-to-one links between earnings and or contributions and pension entitlements, which in Poland is associated with the minimum pension, which provides some distributive features to the pension system. All the countries have, over the last 20 years, experimented in introducing stronger funded pensions with some back and forth, with especially large reversals in Poland, but also some in Estonia and Czechia. So I think that, and I think we will be able to discuss it in more in depth in the discussion how these experiments or the tries to introduce more funding in the pension system work in these countries, because they really show some examples what works and what doesn't work in this area. When we think what is important in this pension design in these countries for the future, so how they are able to deal with the aging pressure. Generally, countries, sometimes they do rely more about just from time to time to change the pensions, the parameters of the pension system, or to introduce some systemic reforms. Whereas it has become more and more popular to introduce some automatic adjustment mechanisms, which mean that there is some automatic links between parameters of the pension system to the demographic developments or the economic situation or the financial balance of the pension system itself, which can help to make to more automatically and politically easier deal with the aging pressure put on the pension systems. Among these countries, Czechia is the one that has no links to no automatic adjustment mechanisms to aging. They do rely on political process to change the parameters from time to time when it is perceived as needed. As we can see, with not that bad results, and Czechia belongs to 12 other OECD countries which have not developed some mechanisms so far. Then we have Poland, which within the NDC design have a strong benefit adjustment, which lowers the benefits both lowers or maybe that lowers the replacement rate, not necessarily the benefits, the replacement rate when the life expectancy improves and nothing else changes, and when the contribution base is shrinking, so when the number of people contributing is shrinking, then it also has negative effects on the replacement rates. And this is the way. So this is the way that Poland has been coping with aging through automatically lowering the benefits when the aging pressure is increasing. And then there are also Estonia has also a link to the number of contributors or the total contribution benefits, to the contribution receipts in the system. So it also adjusts the benefits to aging. But Estonia is also belongs to 8 countries which link the retirement age to life expectancy. So having a link not only to the benefits but also to the retirement age. And then Estonia belongs to 8 other OECD countries who have such a link. Among them Denmark, Finland, Greece, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, Sweden. Estonia has quite a strong link, transmitting the life expectancy 1-to-1 to retirement ages, while some other countries have, let's say, weaker links, so transmitting only 2/3 of increase of life expectancy with age. There are also some other benefits, but I will some other ways to link pensions to and to cope with aging the pension system, but I think this is a matter of different discussions. So having seen what are the current outcomes, what is the design of pensions, how pensions in these countries can react to population aging, here is the pressure that population aging is putting on these countries. This is shown as a number of people aged 65 and more, divided by the number of people for 100 people aged 2064. And from the and this figure shows you the long-term perspective from 50s to of the 100 years, how this has behaved and is likely to behave in the future, because especially for the next 20-30 years, this is quite determined, the behavior of the statistics. And first you can see that although the starting points were quite different in the 50s, around 2000, they are quite similar, and the dynamics are rapid. Over the next 20-30 years are rapid, but quite similar across these 3 countries, and close to the OECD average. We can see that after 2050, the dynamics may differ more, with acceleration in Poland and more slowing down in Czechia and Estonia somewhere in the middle. But for the next 20 years, 30 years, it's going to be a rapid process and not that far from the OECD average. You can see this maybe you can see these gray lines that show other OECD countries, and you can see that this can differ a lot. What is important, the process is fast. It will the number of people 65 will double, almost will double over the last 30-40 years in all the countries, and it will reach and it will go above the current level of the most aged country, which is Japan today across OECD. So in all these countries over the next 20-30 years, there will be more aged than Japan today, which shows you that this will really be a quite transformative phenomenon across all the countries. The aging, so changing the structure of the population, is obviously linked to people living longer, life expectancy. And this is a common process across most or all the countries. But there's also the second element, which is the shrinking of the working age population, which also shows that it shows the pressure on the revenue side, no more or less than expenditure side of the pay-as-you-go schemes. And Central Eastern European countries will experience very strong dynamics here, with Poland seeing almost 40% decrease of the working age population in the next 40 years. Estonia 30% and Czechia more like 23% of these decreases, against a decrease among OECD countries on average by 30%. So this will be a very strong process in these countries and putting even larger pressure on the pension systems. This, of course, depends on the future development of demographics, whether the assumptions, the models are right. In particular, we know that they might not fully account for the changing patterns of the migration. So maybe the process will be less so if the migration processes are helping it to some extent, but this is still a question mark for the future. Because, yeah, here the process is the fertility, which will, however, have, even if we see any observes any changes in the fertility, will affect the population with 20 in the 20 years it will start. So I think for fertility we are quite. It doesn't matter much what over the next 20 years what will happen with fertility. It will matter down the road, but less so now. So we discussed how the pension system benefits are adjusted automatically in some countries to the aging pressure, what is the situation today, and what this aging pressure is. And as a result of this automatic adjustment, the aging pressure, you can see that in Estonia and Poland, the replacement rates, so the amount of pension compared to the wages for a person who starts career now and will retire at normal retirement age, so in about 40, 50 years from now, it will be very low in Poland and Estonia. In Poland, so below 40%. Estonia, it's 40% in Poland, but this is for men in Poland. For women, it would be even 32%, so much lower for women because of their low retirement ages. And for Czechia, it will be closer to the OECD average. So the replacement rate is not going down, and it is consistent with what we have shown, that first, the aging pressure in Czechia is less so, and the second, there is no automatic adjustment of pensions to aging in Czechia. These results do account for the sort of some lowering of future benefits in Czechia that were legislated last year. But even with this, the replacement rate will be very high. You can also see here when we compare the bars with the diamonds, which the bars are the numbers for the average earner, and the diamonds are for the low earners, so people earning half the average wage. You can see how, to some extent, you can see how redistributive the pension system is expected to be in the future. And these replacement rates for low earners are much higher than average earner in Estonia and Czechia, especially in Czechia, and not so much for Poland, because the minimum pension, if it is updated for the future as legislated, so more to prices than to wages, it will be still below the pension that the low earner can expect. So there are specific features in the, and this dimension of pensions is less evident for Poland than for other countries. When we look not from that when we come at the picture of expenditure to the picture of benefits, we can see quite distinctive patterns across countries. First, you can see that in Poland, the expenditure today are 11 percentage points of GDP, which is the highest across these countries, much higher than the OECD average. But given all the adjustment mechanisms, you can expect this to stabilize and even decline in the future. But this is still, but given there are no increases assumed for the retirement ages, this will mean a strong benefit adjustment, as we have seen, and this will be definitely a challenge both on societal point of view and from the political point of view, whether this can be kept this way. And we have seen recently in Poland also some adjustment of benefits and discretionary increases of benefits. So this pathway for Poland being stable will depend largely on the political commitment, but also on the societal perception of the pension in the future. In Estonia, on the other hand, the expenditure are low, also expected to remain low or even decline. And this will be on the other side quite challenging, because even the pension outcome, the relative income of pensions is low. The poverty rate is high in Estonia. Whether further decreases can be is probably apolitically sustainable is still a question, and what will be the political consensus and social consensus here is an open question. But for now, given the rules, there is not much pressure on expenditure, which Czechia differs a lot because now the expenditure are not far from Estonia, but the aging pressure will increase them substantially, going from 8 to 11% of GDP, so 3% of GDP, which is quite a lot to balance. These are projections for 2024, so they don't account for the last reform of 2025 in Czechia, which by increasing retirement ages and lowering future benefits will mean that the expenditure are likely to be lower than shown here, but still, even the reform, there will be still some increase of expenditure in Czechia. So to summarize up all these dimensions that we just discussed to open the discussion, this table tries to look into all these dimensions and to highlight what are the key challenges in the countries, as we can see them now from a, let's say, bird's view. And going just country by country, since that for Czechia, this high spending in the future might be the larger challenge, because in other dimensions they don't really stand out in negative terms from other OECD countries. For Estonia, the high poverty and relative low relative income is a challenge for today. Given the rules, it seems the replacement rate will still be low in the future, so this is not addressed by current policies. And the demographic pressure is quite high, but there's less issue of expenditure, pension expenditure. And then for Poland, there are even more problems, even though now the income situation of older people doesn't seem to be that worrying. It's likely to be more and more the case in the future, as aging pressure will transfer into the deficit adjustment. But also on top of, which is less the case in these countries, the low retirement age, the future retirement age and low employment of older people is an important issue in Poland compared to other countries. And let me finalize here, just hopefully with this picture that the discussion that it will serve the discussion anyhow. Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, Maciej. This was a great introduction, and I think I'm really grateful that you took the initiative to have this discussion, because indeed I find all three countries have very interesting features. And also they teach us a lot about, let's say, the political economy of reforms, because many reforms were done and then taken back. And I think we will have much to discuss. And we have three great experts to do that with us. For Poland, and there's Agnieszka Chrondominczak, who has worked also with the OECD for many, many years on pensions, and she's now, or for a long time, has been at Szkoła Główna Handlowa, so Warsaw School of Economics. It's good to see you, Agnieszka. Thanks for being here. We have Lauri Lepik, I hope I pronounce it well, from Tallinn University. So he's an expert on Estonia. And finally, we have Philip Berthold. He's from a research institute, I think, from Charles University in Czechia. And it's good to have you here. It would be good to have, well, Maciej is on the screen too. So I think I'm going to start with a sort of simple question to you, Agnieszka, because we are looking at how the relative income of pensioners had declined in Poland quite a bit. But I was just wondering, given how dynamic the Polish economy is this because income went sort of down? Or is it because the income of old people came down actually? Or is it because the income of the working age population was so dynamic, given the dynamic economic development?
Well, I mean, formally, the income of the old people didn't go down because, I mean, if we look at the average pensions, they still increase when we look at the values in the currency. However, I mean, it's a combination of both. So first, we indeed have a quite dynamic growth of wages. We had a period of high inflation, but what we observe is that the labor market and the wages grow, which is again a combination of certain factors, including that young people are much more educated compared to the older people, so that adds to the dynamic. And the second factor is indeed that the growth of the income of older people is smaller, because first we have indexation of pensions, which is based on the fraction of the real growth of wages. So we have inflation plus 20% of the real growth of wages. That means that the average pension to average wage ratio goes down by definition. And on the top of it, as Maciek mentioned, we've introduced a pension reform in 1999. So we have notional defined contribution system, and right now we are in transition between the old defined benefit scheme and the new defined contribution scheme, which means that newly granted pensions relative to wages are smaller currently compared to how they have been a decade ago or so, when most of the people who retired still retired according to the old system, or maybe 2 decades ago. So this is a certain transition, and both of that, I mean, so the dynamic growth of the labor market and the economy, and also gradual adjustments in pensions, they lead to this change in the average wage, the average pension to average wage ratio.
Okay, perfect. Just for our audience, because I'm not sure whether they're all pension experts. So defined benefit basically means that
before 1999, and we had a system that calculated a pension that was a combination of a flat component and a certain percentage, which was roughly 1.3 for each year of work of the average individual wage relative to the average in the economy. So as a result, in the old system, one could expect a pension that was an equivalent of around 70% of the previous wages, which was quite high for the OECD standards and for the developed country standards. As Maciek have shown with the notional defined contribution, when we have actuarial adjustment, that will go down to much lower level. This happens gradually, so this is not a change that has an immediate effect, because all people who have worked before 1999, they have something that we call initial capital. So this is like the old pension formula recalculated into a capital that was credited to individual accounts. So as a result, we have this gradual transition between this very high replacement rate in the old system to the new system with lower replacement rate.
Perfect. So defined contribution is basically, it all depends on what you've contributed, right? And it probably doesn't have to be that way in any case, but the defined benefit pension systems tend to be a bit more generous, right? And so if you switch your rights, your pension rights go down. I think I'm going to go to the two big things that stood out with the 2 other countries. So Philip, we saw that, well, Czechia, no, the pension income is quite good, also not going down a lot, but on the other hand, spending will go up quite a bit. So is that a big political issue that people are worried about in Czechia? And are you thinking about reforms? Or are you pretty relaxed thinking, well, demographic pressure isn't that strong and we are a strong economy, it will be okay? Would be interested in hearing the mood from Czechia.
Yeah, so we just changed our government. So the previous government introduced a reform that exactly targeted the issue of future demographic challenges. So they introduced quite substantial measures into the system, including increasing the retirement age beyond 65, also decreasing of newly entitled pensions, slight, let's say, small decrease and progressive decrease of the entitled pension in future, and some other measures like lower indexation, because previously there was inflation plus half of the real wage growth, and they diminish it to inflation plus 1/3 of the real wage growth. So altogether, so there were projections saying that in 50s and 40s, 50s, there will be deficit just from the pension system about 4% of GDP, 3 to 4% of GDP. And by by introducing these measures, they basically address about half of it, according to the estimation of the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs and also National Budgetary Council. So basically, it should, if these measures survive, the future deficit from this virtual account, I should say, should be about 1.5 to 2% of GDP, which is not great, but not that terrible also. However, especially the pension age is a huge political issue, and basically the current government that has been now introduced, they most likely reverse the pension age increase, which should have been 65 to 67. So it looks like most likely scenario is that they reverse it and the pension age will stay at 65, which will of course introduce, it will cause huge, quite substantial costs in future. It's very difficult to change this pension age, especially now that the pension age is increasing quite rapidly, but it's still below the 65. Now, around year 30, 31, it will hit the 65 threshold. And then, of course, if it's not adjusted further, like now, it will be difficult to change it again, right? Not only from the political issues, but also because people will hit basically the ceiling, and it will be difficult from the law perspective also to change it in future. So this is the situation current, and so it is subject to political debate, but current government or current political forces, they tend to ignore based on the will of their basically voters. They tend to ignore these demographic pressures in future.
Mm-hmm. Well, picking up on that, Claudia, I was going to talk about old age poverty, but maybe first we should look into that issue, because that's quite impressive, right? So the OECD always tells member countries increase pension age, link it to demographics, etc. You seem to have done it, and it seems to work, at least for the moment. So maybe you have to tell us the magic formula that you have in Estonia to go through with such a reform and also stay put. Is this not so controversial as in other countries, or what is the trick here?
Well, it's perhaps a bit difficult to say in a comparative perspective, but indeed in Estonia, raising pension age has not been in the center of the pension debates. So there have been, of course, some debates around it, but for the time being, pension age is 65 for both men and women, and as already told by Maciej, starting from next year, it will be linked to increases in life expectancy. So we already know what it will be for the following two cohorts. So this has not been at the center of debates, introducing these automatic adjustment mechanisms in the pension system. But indeed, as you pointed out, the Estonian case stands out for rather high old age poverty. But when we look into sort of historical trends, we have seen quite significant fluctuations. And the thing behind these is that we have had a rather flat structure of pensions. So the variation in the amounts of state pension has not been very high. And the average old age pension is around the relative poverty line, measured by 60% of median equalized income. So it is simply the fact that as the average pension is around this relative poverty line, that many old age persons find themselves in a situation where they may in 1 year be in relative poverty, and in the next year may be above this threshold. So if we were to draw the relative poverty line at the level of 50% of median equalized income, then already the old age poverty rate would drop to 10%. So it's really a sort of a statistical artifact that many people are just around this relative poverty line.
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
No, I was just wondering, is it a hotly debated issue that that old age people are struggling, that older people are struggling to cope, or do they look into other countries and say this is not fair? Or would you say, well, you know, this is their income level and it seems to work quite well politically?
Mm-hmm. So in a way, yes, this is not a new situation for us. So there have been, of course, from time to time, and in particular before elections, there are debates that we should address the income situation of older people. But paradoxically, after the elections, then there are debates that perhaps we should freeze the indexation of old age pensions so that the pension income would not rise according to a pre-established formula. So we have had a steady indexation of pensions along the social tax income revenue increase and consumer price index. So the main controversy in the political debates around the Estonian pension system is still that whether state support for the funded pension system shall stay, or the political party which is at the highest level in the rankings for the time being, they have some ideas that we should decrease the state contributions to the funded pillar. So this is the main controversy. But the current income situation and the retirement age, I would say, not at the core of political debates.
So the state basically contributes to the funded system. The people contribute and the state matches a little bit for everybody, or for lower income workers?
For all. So if you contribute 2% of your wage, and actually you have also now the option to increase your second pillar contributions to 4% or 6% of your wage. But if you put in your individual contributions, then the state matches it with 4%, which is redirected from the social tax. So, but you can conceive this scheme as sort of that paying 2% individual contribution allows you to redirect 4 percentage points from the social tax to your second pillar accounts. Okay. So this is the system.
Very good. And we definitely have to go to, because all three countries, well, experimented and state put or less or not at all to funded pillar system. And that's obviously something other OECD countries are very interested in too. But before I move to that subject fully, Matej, I want to ask you this question. I just asked our panel. Yeah, so the OECD always says, well, do index pension age to the demographic evolution, etc. Sometimes countries try to do it, or they increase pension ages, and it's politically very costly. They go down again. So is there some lesson from the countries who did it and it works? So how do we assist countries who sort of think we need to do it, but it's politically so costly we cannot?
So there is no golden bullet for this. The idea about these automatic links is to some extent to lesser the political costs of this, so that we can decide now about the measure we take, and then we don't need to every few years make a huge discussion again about how to address the same thing. So this is the idea that one of the advantages. Something that we have also seen is not that we are not saying that increase retirement age always, and that because there are also other concerns, and there are other issues and that has to be solved to have a successful both labor market and pension outcomes. What is quite interesting is that we can see that going sometimes too far in terms of, for example, linking very strongly retirement age to life expectancy, like 1-to-1. Like Estonia did, because might have had some political repercussion at some point, because it effectively means that we are, from generation to generation, we are decreasing the share of life spent on pensions. Because you want one link, but that any increase of life expectancy leads to increasing working life. So let's say if your life so and there are other ways, like some countries do experiment with weaker links, saying, let's say that we don't transmit everything, but we transmit, let's say, for every 12 months of increase of life expectancy, we increase the retirement age by 8 months, let's say 2/3, which over a longer period means that you are keeping the share of working life and the balance between time spent working and pensions more or less constant. And this is something, a debate that we have seen in particular in Denmark and Netherlands to an extent, that's about this. What is the link? So something that it's not. What we also see that building up understanding, political consensus, and understanding of people and consensus across parties and different actors helps a lot, both in having reforms that are sustainable over time and having the links that are sustainable. Just
Thank you. Agnieszka, coming from Poland and having advised the government quite a bit and on pension issues, and probably they went back and forth against your advice, but I'm just wondering, what's your lesson from this? So much is said, well, you need to build an understanding, you need to build consensus. But Denmark, for example, seems to be also a country that's sort of good in building broad political consensus. Some other countries are more divided, no? Is it even doable to follow these reforms? So you have the pension age increase, but also the funded pillar system. I think you went back and forth. So what went wrong? Is there a good lesson for this to learn for other countries when they try to introduce such reforms?
I think what Maciek said is extremely important, that you have a broad consensus, not only political, but also a good communication to the public, to the society, on why we need those reforms, because they are not made because the world is rosy and we want to make it more rosier, but it's more about the fact that populations are aging and we need to somehow balance the pension systems and social systems to meet this demographic challenge. And I think, what happened in Poland is that we have built this consensus in the late 1990s when the pension reform was started. And then the subsequent government, they did little steps to go back, to take some people out of the pension system, then to postpone withdrawal of early retirement. And all of that didn't really build a good sort of atmosphere around the pension system. And then with the reversals of the funding, that was, I think, a general movement of the great crisis with the public finance situation. As Lauri mentioned, in all of the countries we have introduced funded systems, but that also meant that we need to have more financing from the state budget, either as a co-payment or as a sort of revenue topping up for the current pension payout, so that the government, the old pensioners could receive their pensions. And that was made around, the reversal in Poland was made around the rationale that the pension funds are bad, they are having negative returns, and they charge a lot of money. Which wasn't totally true. So the returns, of course, were not very good during the crisis times, but overall they weren't bad. When we looked at the average, the same with the costs, they weren't that high, and then there were ideas to change it. With the change of the retirement age, which was a later initiative that was introduced around 2012, the problem was that it wasn't really communicated well to the society. So it was very much enforced by the government, who had a majority. And then with the change of the government and the new political, I mean, the Peace Party coming into the government, that was a part of the political debate and the sort of election campaign promises. So this is actually something that, as Lauri mentioned, in Estonia, the funding issue is one of the biggest issues discussed in pensions. In Poland, I think it is the retirement age. So right now, there's I would say, a broad political consensus that changing the retirement age costs you the government and ruling. So no political party is willing to do that, despite the obvious facts, including the fact that people are living longer and healthier, so their pensions will be smaller given the pension formula that was mentioned, but also the gap in retirement age of men and women causes the increasing gender gap. So it's not that high right now, but the projections show that it might be even higher in the future. And so this is something that requires attention. And I think the only way to do that is actually to have this very extensive dialogue with the society to explain the reasons, which are related in sort of the sustaining the intergenerational contract, given also that the working age population will be shrinking, that was shown by Maciej, and the fact that it will be, I mean, the current fertility levels and the number of births in Poland doesn't show that things will change dramatically. So we can slow down the population aging to a certain extent with migrations, but this is not something that will solve the problem if we keep the retirement age. But this is one of the most difficult political topics that we have in Poland at the moment.
Yeah, I do remember I worked on Poland when basically the increase in the retirement age was revoked. And our thing, or we said then, was that, well, if it's politically so difficult, maybe it's enough to have a defined contribution pension, and then for people to see that they will have a higher retirement age. And I think you can stay beyond the normal retirement age. And what I'm curious about is that happening? Because in some ways, a normal retirement age doesn't have an economic meaning, right? Or at least if you can go beyond, people don't have to leave work, but they sort of do, right? Or do you observe people staying on longer, for example, women staying on longer because they see they don't have the retirement income that they would like to have?
What we observe is that people combine. So the distrust into the pension system goes into the way that once I reach retirement age, I want to retire as soon as possible because maybe someone will do something to my pension. So I think this is at the back of people's minds all the time. And then when they are still in, let's say, quite productive age, especially, I mean, women aged 60 these years are really quite active and they still have a lot to offer on the labor market, so they continue working, a lot of them. So though it's, I mean, it's not the majority, the employment rate of women is much lower compared to men. So averaging that much, is not good for Poland to actually understand the labor market. So they do continue. We also observe that some people decide to postpone their retirement quite strongly. So we sometimes have those discussions on what is the highest pension paid in Poland. And right now it's more than 10,000 euro for a person who has more than 60 years of work experience, who didn't retire. So we try to show those examples that really a lot depends on the individual decisions, but still people retire quite early. And this is something that we clearly see in the data, that when we look at the average effective retirement age, it is very close to the legal retirement age for both men and women.
Thank you. Well, maybe I'm going to throw in a question that came from the audience to you, Philip, because somebody asked, and I think it's interesting. So we saw the gender pension gaps aren't wide, and Marci said, well, this is because the employment rates are actually high, probably a legacy from the communist era. But I think in Estonia, I'm not sure, but I think Czech Republic, Poland, the infrastructure for childcare is not fantastic, let's say, in international comparison. And so from the audience, there was this thought, well, all three countries have shorter careers for women due to caregiving and lower lifetime earnings, etc. And particularly if your defined contributions, that can also penalize women more. So my question to you, Philip, is that an issue in the Czech Republic? So are you thinking about, could there be a problem? There's perhaps less in relative terms of a problem with gender pension gaps today, but they could increase, and maybe we need to do something about it.
Yes, so let me first react to the previous discussion. So I think one important issue, if you compare our countries with such countries like Denmark, that there are functioning active labor market policies in Denmark, right? There is functioning preventive health care policies, which is prolonging the health career in general, and the people understand when they lose job in their 50s that they can get really good help from the labor offices and so on, and healthy life years allows them to have quite long career. There is much more mobility on the labor market. There are much more changing jobs in the labor market in Denmark and Netherlands than in our countries, or especially in Czech Republic. So I think this is quite a difference, and which also helps to explain why the retirement age is such a big issue in Czech Republic, because people are essentially surviving into the last job, and they are not willing to change jobs anymore when they hit 55, and basically often they do jobs that they don't like. So basically they want to leave the labor market. They have health issues, lack of preventive care basically is hitting the population with the civilization issues, the illnesses and so on. So I would like to say that, keeping the first pillar working means also that you need to have other policies that are helping people to live on the labor market, or to survive on the labor market as long as possible. So that's one remark. The second thing, regarding your questions about gender gaps. So basically the formula for the defined benefit is such that it redistributes a lot from rich to poor, as I say. So that's partly diminishing the gender pay gap, right? The second thing is that this long period in Czech Republic, we have a long period of caring, which are mostly on the burden on women. So basically, traditionally, there is a 6 years gap in the career related to child caring. So basically, this enters the formula. There is a compensation in the formula, basically for this year's explicitly, that basically partly diminishes this impact of this career gap. So, and the last thing, it was so before, so a couple of years ago, the gender pension gap was about 11-12% or something like this. Now it's even less because there has been introduction of additional compensation on top of all these implicit compensation within the formula. So there was an explicit compensation that essentially was a lump sum money for every child that was born for the woman. In some exceptional cases, there could be for men, but mainly mothers, like current pensioners, mothers that basically that in the system they had 1 or 2 kids or whatever number of kids they had explicit lump sum compensation every month. So this was introduced and even further diminishes the gender pension gap. So there are quite at least 3 mechanisms that explicitly address this, because otherwise on the labor market we observe substantial gender wage gap, which is about 18 or 19%, but this is not translated to the pension from the reason I told you. One more remark is that we don't have a second pillar, similarly and not differently to the Poland and Estonia. We have a third pillar, which is actually, but however, very similar to the second pillar in terms of enrollment. So we have about 80% of labor force enrolled in the third pillar because the current government is spending about 15 billion crowns direct and indirect support for the savings. However, these money are invested in very conservative way and they don't have big returns, and also the fees for funds are substantial. But in international comparisons, you can see that we don't have a second pillar. But if you look into our third pillar, which is voluntary, but the government is so much subsidizing it, it's essentially the enrollment is very close to the second pillars.
And the second pillar was not mandatory? So
no, so there was a short period of second pillar, but it wasn't mandatory, and it was abolished after a couple of years.
So just to understand, so you have a non-mandatory funded pension pillar, and then there's that's sort of a voluntary private saving that's subsidized by the government, and that's the third pillar.
We have only the third pillar now. The second pillar doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. And because with that question, I'm going to move to Laudi. Why was it abolished, this funded pillar in the Czech?
It was poorly designed. There was no political agreement on some kind of, Czechs are very careful, conservative, and they don't have any state deficits. So basically, once you introduce some kind of decrease in the social tax, then of course introduce deficits and so on. So basically, there was no political agreement in general, and basically one government introduced it, and the second just canceled that. And also at that time, it was about 15 years ago, and that time there was very strong perception that we cannot trust the private funds, pension funds. So there was another layer. But as I said, in the meantime, we have third pillar with 4 million people enrollment. We have 5 million labor force, right? But we have third pillar with 4 million people into that. We are paying incredible fees with no returns, and nobody really cares. Maybe this government will change it because there is finally some pressure to do that coming from our side, from the academia, essentially, because we quantified the high costs of the third pillar and how much people pay for the fees and so on. So maybe they change something, but it's in the process.
Claudia, something, it's interesting to hear from Philip and also Agnieszka about, limited trust into these private funds. But Agnieszka also said something else that was very interesting. interesting. She said, well, people take out their pension because they're afraid there are going to be changes, right? And they don't, they'd rather I have it now.
Let me just say one note to that. Sir, we don't have this problem because the people can work and take pensions. So we have a possibility in the Czech Republic that you cross the statutory retirement age, you receive the pensions, and you are continuously working with no punishment or something. And even there is now actually benefit. You don't have to pay the social tax on the employee side. So basically you receive the pensions, you work continuously, and you pay lower taxes. So this is what's happened. This is in the Czech Republic, and I think it's kind of well, quantification is not yet ready, but I think we partly, I think, motivate some people to basically continue kind of career beyond the statutory retirement age. But this is of course costly from the government perspective because they are paying out pensions, right?
Yeah. I was just, maybe before I go to Lauri, because then I'm going to ask him about trust there. Agnieszka, I want to turn back to you and ask this problem that people think, oh, I better take out the pension and then I do continue to work because I kind of want to and I need to. Wouldn't there be a solution to say, yeah, there's been a lot of back and forth in pension policies, but to the extent that people work past the normal retirement age, we guarantee that the system they had when they were at the normal age is sort of grandfathered. Has that ever been thought about to encourage people to stay fully?
Well, I mean, it is the policy in general, and this kind of message is conveyed to people regularly. But in a way, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstandings and also misinformation in the public. So, for example, when we had a change of the introduction of bridging pensions, that was in 2008. We saw that a lot of people basically retired just before the beginning of 2009, even if some of them could have continued to work a little bit longer. And when at that time, I looked at the media, various kinds of newspapers or magazines. There were advices, for example, you should take your pension because otherwise you might have to work longer, even if people had their pension rights accrued. So basically the law is that once you have your pension accrued, it is yours and nothing can happen to it. But still people are not fully absorbing this message in a way that they are sure that something would not change. So despite the fact that these are accrued rights and people can, nothing will happen. People still react to that, as I have mentioned.
Yeah, Lauri, on that point, is it the case that because it seems Estonia went a little bit less back and forth and people accept higher retirement ages, etc. Is it your impression that they trust pension policies more, the continuity that they will get what they're told they're going to get? Is there a difference here?
I'm not so sure if the difference is so major. We had a pension literacy study 2 years ago, where, among others, also the trust aspect was analyzed, and it appears that yes, the trust is an issue, that there people have seen the changes in the pension policies and some back and forth movements, in particular concerning the funded pillar. But I'll just come back to the question raised by Ihor, and he mentioned that women generally have shorter careers in all three countries, and this is definitely not the case in Estonia. We have some of the highest female employment rates in late career. So we have in general, very high employment rates in age groups before pension age and after the pension age. And broadly, the low income situation or the low relative incomes of older persons, low relative replacement rates also, of course, put a strong pressure for older persons to continue in the labor market. But we also see that there is an educational vector in this employment in old age groups, that women, in particular those with high education, they continue to work beyond pension age. These are doctors, medical doctors, these are teachers, and these are professions where people can continue to work well after the pension age. And similar to the Czech Republic, we have the possibility to combine work earnings from work and pensions. So
In Poland too.
yes, but you see, apparently, even if the policy is the same, the outcomes are different. So it does not, the policy parameters do not solve the math alone. So it's also how sort of people adjust themselves to the policies. But now, as to the second pillar or the funded pillar, yes, we introduced the funded pillar in 2002. The participation was mandatory only for those who entered the labor market at that time, but many people joined voluntarily. Now we had a partial reversal 2021 when the coalition at that time they maintained the mandatory enrollment, so people are still automatically enrolled, but they allowed to withdraw or to opt out from the funded pillar. And about 1/3 of those who had joined opted out. And the most controversial issue with the Estonian reform was that it was allowed to opt out before pension age and to withdraw also the full account immediately. Also the part that was sort of transferred from the social tax by the state. So and we have seen now, but still, yes, I would say this first, that over 60% of the working population still remain in the funded pillar. So, and this is also some indication of the trust that many people still realize that they cannot rely fully on the state pension, and the only way then is to save themselves. So. But we have also analyzed who were these people who opted out, and these were sort of people who had joined but had been sort of a passive in the funded pillar. They had not made a good choice of the fund. More frequently, these were people who had lower education level. And of course, this mass in the long perspective will make up that the income differences in the old age will only increase, because a significant share of people, they have already spent their retirement savings before the pension age, and their first pillar pension will be lower as a result of that as well. So it will be a difficult math, but we will have to live with it.
How much does, if I may, I'm sure you have some simulations or even experience with pensioners now, because we saw Estonian pensioners tend to have relatively low retirement income. How much does this funded pillar help? What's the average top up sort of? Do you know?
Well, of course, it depends on the how long you have stayed in the in the second pillar. Yes, depending on the enrollment period, it may top up to 25% of the to the first pillar pension.
Well, it's quite a bit, no? So you can see how important the financial education is. But Agnieszka, you had a point about women, and also there's a question about Poland that there was a new like voluntary private saving, I think occupational pensions, right? And I think there was also an opt-out, so you would sort of be nudged to be automatically enrolled. And EO says that it hasn't been taken up a lot, so it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, with the employee pension plans, employee capital plans, the participation is gradually increasing because, I mean, there are certain slots of time when people have to make their decisions again or to stay in the PPKs, which is an auto-enrollment mechanism, and that's gradually changing because also people see that their savings are there and they can use them. A lot of people cash out, which is exactly not a good policy, but it builds this kind of feeling that these are really my savings and I can use them. So basically, that is a part of the system that gradually gains understanding.
Mm-hmm. And your point with women, do you still remember? You said something. No.
Well, I mean, women in Poland, they are penalized in a way double because, I mean, the life expectancy is longer when they retire. They also have shorter working life. So this is definitely a challenge. Though many women in Poland, they actually work full time, which is not the case of many developed countries when women a lot work part-time much more. So this is the specificity of the Central and Eastern European countries. And I think that helps a little bit. But the challenge of caring mentioned is a huge issue, and not only with regards to children, but more and more with regards to adult family members, those that require long-term care with very underdeveloped LTC systems. This becomes an important policy debate in Poland, how to actually provide caring.
Perfect.
And I'm sorry, I have to switch to my phone because I have to move to another place, but I will stay online.
Yeah, we are almost done, Agnieszka, but maybe I can just pose two more questions to Maciej to sort of conclude in some way. So what I found is interesting was that what Philip said, Maciej, that we need to, it's more difficult with a less flexible labor market, like in the Czech Republic, where you don't have opportunities to change, do something more interesting. Or we also had a remark from Ihor, you know, can we see lots of productivity increases? Perhaps we can with new technologies, but do we need to think more about the labor market for older people? That's one question. And then the second point we had, well, with these second or third pillars, sometimes not very well designed and fees being high, etc. Does there need to be more attention to how they're being designed? For example, the Swedish example where you have a government default and then quite some regulation on the fees. Are those things countries should think about when they try again for funded pillars or increasing retirement ages when people just stay in the job where they are?
Okay, yes, very broad questions for the end. It's like, yeah, there are many things that needs to be done and can be improved a lot in labor market policies, as Philip mentioned, in occupational health issues that these systems are still being developed. There's one dimension to this, and and the retirement age is not the only policy that all the work policy can be reduced to. But yeah, these are opening large boxes here. Was also interesting, I think, in the countries that in all of them you have a huge cohort effect, change of the cohorts of those cohorts who enter labor market in the 90s there was a huge educational change, like really massive, like going higher education rates increasing from 10% to 50%, for example, over like 20 years. And you can also observe that it's much easier for people with higher education or with more education, more skills evolved to stay longer on the labor market. And it's also something that we observe happening a lot in especially in these countries, because this after the regime change, the cohort change, and let's say the change of the incentives on the labor market of different skills being earning more had huge effects in this country, you can observe. The second point about the funding pillar, it is very interesting to some extent, because in some countries we can see, like, I think it has been the case in particular, that we observe the returns, this varies a lot, and the design varies a lot. I think that the outcomes of the Polish funded pillar were quite good in that sense, but there were other political issues and the financial pressure that sort of did not allow it to survive that much. What is also quite interesting now in Poland is Poland is developing these schemes quite a little bit differently, engaging employers more. As you mentioned, the Swedish example, as quite also in Netherlands, in Denmark, the employers and the companies are involved to a larger extent to develop the pension savings. And this is sort of a switch that Poland did, like in the past. It was more based on individual accounts, and employers not being that much involved and being mandatory also. Now it's more switched to being auto-enroll and employers more being involved, which might bring some stability to the system itself and maybe some trust more into this. I think, yeah, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Yes. And Agnieszka is also already moving to her next event. So I think we have to let her off the hook. I found this very interesting to look really into the perspectives of 3 neighboring countries with similar issues, but then perhaps a different design of their systems and also different experiences. So this was very, insightful. Thank you very much, Lauri, Agnieszka. On the run, and Philip, and also Maciej, of course, for making this happen, and also our audience that engaged actively, in particular Iho, who had lots of good questions. Thanks a lot.